That's I'd never heard it described that way, and I know a lot of our listeners are curious about. That's why we're asking these questions. But the fact that you've got to make sure the defense attorney is doing his job, because that brings up his client's claim afterwards of ineffective counsel if he doesn't do his job correctly, and then you got to go through the whole damn thing again.
Yeah, I mean, there's no sense in doing that. Not if you can prompt them to do something that hadn't been done. I mean, it just makes sense to do that. Otherwise, you're just doing it for no reason. You're just going to come back and do it again.
What's a Rule 32?
It's a post-conviction remedy that a defendant has where he can raise issues like ineffective assistance of counsel. And if the facts are on his side, he can get a new trial. He can get a conviction set aside.
So now in Alabama, do you have discovery or is it trial by ambush?
No, it's discovery. And, we, again, just like we do as far as giving notice to defense lawyers about when their cases are going to be tried, we try our best on getting our discovery out as quickly as we can, again, because it does me no good for defense lawyers not to have their discovery. I mean, they can't advise their client or discuss with their client what they think they should do if they can't fully appreciate a case. So, I mean, we certainly, there's times when we're maybe slow about it or we may miss something, but by and large, I feel like we do a good job of getting what we're supposed to get to the defense lawyers as quickly as we can. Because again, unless both sides can appreciate what they're dealing with, there's no way you can resolve a case. So it's to your benefit to do that.
And you made a statement earlier I want to ask you about too, because you said, you don't get a lot of money from the state. When you do a death penalty case, what's the cost to the taxpayer? I mean, because I know it's kind of tough, but like on average, it's your time, it's lab fees, it's witness, it's whatever it is, right? All that time. What do you think it costs to fully prosecute? Let's say you get a guilty verdict, and even up through appeals. What's the cost to the taxpayers when you're looking at a case like that?
Honestly, I don't know that it's that it costs that much more with respect to what I do, because again, when it gets down to just trying the case, it's the same thing. I mean, I'm calling the same people from forensics that I always do in a murder case. It's really not that different. You're just proving murder plus an aggravating circumstance. So that doesn't cause you to have to do anything different from a prosecution standpoint. The big cost to the taxpayer is how much the defense attorney can bill for that. And there's no limits on it. So, they can bill an exorbitant amount for a capital case that either drags out for a long period of time or it ends up in court on a bunch of motion that have to be argued in court. And then if the trial ends up being a lengthy trial, because they they get to bill different rates if they're in court or out of court. So it ends up costing the state a lot of money just from, I think, mostly because of what they have to pay for indigent defense.
Now, but the ones that are doing indigent defense, do you have, what is your version of it down there than the public defender, or do you have to, or is it all everybody's appointed to do work? It's
appointed. We do not have a public defender in my circuit.
Okay. So the ones that are doing this work, are you getting look, let's just be honest, there are different skill levels for attorneys, just like there are, in any other profession, medical, legal. Does everybody have a requirement to do some of those cases, or is it just that you have a certain group of lawyers that do all the indigent defense work?
I think by and large, I think the judge tries to kind of fairly dole those cases out, primarily just to keep any one lawyer, from having too many of those cases, because they are so time consuming. But I think also I've noticed with our judges over the last 20 years, they also recognize those lawyers that they would probably prefer to be involved in those cases where you are seeking a death penalty or it's a capital case, and they seem to gravitate to those lawyers more times than not. So I think they try to spread them out as best they can, but it does seem like the same lawyers do end up getting a bunch of them just because they have a proven track record that they can handle them.
So if you're doing criminal defense work, there's a chance. I mean, you don't volunteer for this stuff. You can be picked by the judge, can look at it and say, one time, Bill Smith, I need you here. You're defending this case.
That's correct. I can't remember what the requirement is, Morgan. You've got to have practice for so long, and then you have got to have, I can't remember the other requirement. I think maybe you have to set, there has to be 2 lawyers appointed to defend someone in a capital case. And I think you have to sit as second chair in maybe a couple of capital cases before you can be lead counsel, but they're designated lead and second chair. So once you get past those requirements, though, yes, they can just point you out in the courtroom and say, Mr. Smith, I'm going to appoint you this case. So
can you confirm or deny, my cousin Vinny, you were part of that was based on you?
Not me. It was not based on me.
Well, it's funny because you're talking about making sure the defense does their job, and in that movie, the prosecutor does that.
Yeah, I do recall some of that. No, I really detested the way they portrayed the South in that movie. To be quite frank with you, but yeah.
They were treating. Well, look, I'm a farm boy from Kansas. They treat you like a bunch of rubes or rednecks. It's like,
that's right.
Yeah, you're from Kansas. You don't know how to do this kind of stuff. Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. People make fun of the South, but everybody wants to move to the South, don't they?
Yeah, I have noticed that over my lifetime.
So it's not quite so bad.
I'm pretty proud of our court system, and I'm certainly proud of what my office does. And I've had the pleasure to work with a lot of good attorneys, some of which have come in, to our circuit to defend cases from a good distance. And, I think they do come to the 17th Circuit with a preconceived idea. And I have, I hope
you
this
have
disabused
them, but disabused them of that misconception, haven't you?
Yes, but it's nice when they leave because a good lawyer knows it's not personal. He knows he's doing a job and I'm doing a job, and it's nice when they do leave your circuit that they come and congratulate you on what you did and compliment how you do it and appreciate the way you do it. That you didn't try to take advantage of them and you didn't try to play hide the ball. That you played fair and you knew what you were doing. And I've always found that to be the case in the 17th Circuit. And that's something that I'm proud of.
I'll tell you what. I mean, I know there's 3 small counties. But just hearing what your manpower is, which is almost non-existent, it's amazing what you guys are getting done then. I don't know how you can keep that docket going, and the crime's not slowing down any at all.
Yeah, it's a chore, Steve. I mean, I tell people, you cannot keep up with it unless you're working at it every day. You've got to be engaged with the lawyers every day, talking about cases, trying to resolve cases every day. You can't wait until you've got a trial term to do that. You've got to be doing it all the while. When you've got dead time where you've not, got a trial term just right at the door, that's when you've got to pull out those files that you got problems in. You got to do the best you can at reconciling those for you, and then you got to reach out to that lawyer and say, look, let's do something with this case. And if you don't do that and you don't do it every day or every week, then it overruns you. So it is definitely something you've got to work at constantly. And if you don't, you can't keep up with it.
Well, just so our listeners know, we're actually conducting this interview in an evening. Greg was gracious enough to his schedule's so busy we couldn't get on his calendar in the daytime. So we're doing this as an evening interview, and we even tried to work out a Saturday, but we didn't want to interfere with your fishing tournaments going on down there. So
I appreciate that.
You got to have some downtime.
That's right.
All right. Before we get into this other story, you got to just tell us who is the stupidest defendant you've ever come across. When you get done, you go, son, stupid's going to hurt in prison, son. That's all I can tell you.
If you're going to be stupid, you got to be tough.
Oh, that list is long. I don't know. It seems like here lately we've had a rash of that. I'll tell you one that's funny. I mean, it was a bad case. We had a guy that he just got enamored with this underage girl that was, I think at the time she was probably about 13 or 14 years old. I guess finally that got the best of him. He just showed up at her house one afternoon. She was there with her mother. No, actually it was her aunt, middle of the day, and kicked his way in. They ran and got in a bedroom and got the door locked. He got to the door. the girl got on the phone and was calling 911. So he started trying to shoot his way in, and the aunt was holding the door. I'll never forget this. She was holding the door, laying on her back with her feet up against the door, and he was shooting through the door, and a 40 caliber bullet entered the top of her head and literally parted her hair from front to back. I mean, literally. And we dug it out of the wall on the other side of the room, and it had her hair matted around it.
Oh man!
So that's how close she came. Now he could not get in, and because he heard her on the phone, he finally gave it up and ran out. And then it went like a day and a half manhunt until we caught him. But he just didn't have a defense. And I remember we got in. He wouldn't plead, so we struck the jury and we started the trial. She was the young girl was my first witness. And she got about to that point where she was describing what was going on in the bedroom. And the defense lawyer, I heard her say something, and I looked over there, and she was like, he said he's heard all he can hear. He wants to plead. So he pled halfway through the first witness. So, but I never understood why he decided to take it that far. So,
but he had to plead straight up to the charges, right? There was no.
He had to plead blind. He had to plead blind at that point in time. So it definitely cost him some years. We had a guy not long ago. We had it was. Well,
hold on a second before we get to that point. What did this guy? What was his brilliant legal strategy? Thinking that they wouldn't show up, that maybe a witness wouldn't show up. I mean,
I never knew. I never knew. We had a case recently we tried last year where a guy, he started an altercation with a guy, and it was caught on security cameras. And so we saw him shooting in the ground and threatening the guy. And then he shot him where you couldn't see him on the cameras. But then he went a couple of houses down and was caught on some security cameras going in these people's house and taking off his bloody clothes and leaving those and taking some of their clothes and leaving out in different clothes. And I can't remember what else we had. We had an eyewitness to it, and he just, for whatever reason, he wouldn't plead. And I think we offered him like 25, and he ended up getting 35. 10 years just for ignorance.
You probably don't know this, Greg, but we have a Patreon subscriber channel on Game of Crimes, and one of our monthly sections is "You can't make this shit up."
No, you
can't. We may have to get you on there.
Yeah, you just can't. But some people.
I remember one of the stories we told, though. It was like one of these stupid idiots. It was kind of like guys in court, victims up there testifying, and masked people had committed the crime and stuff. And she looked at him and she said, "Do you know who did it?" Yes, I recognize this defendant. He did it over. He goes, he stands up. I mean, this is a real case. He stands up. That's bullshit. You couldn't tell it was me. I had a mask on.
Yeah.
You gotta love them.
Yeah.
Your Honor, the defense or the prosecution rests. Right. I got to tell you one more story before we do this. I was down at a grand jury in Atlanta. We had some bank robberies up in our area. We're down in Atlanta. The guy that was doing our robberies up there did a robbery down in Atlanta, carjacked somebody, killed him. So there's a whole federal case in addition to the state case. Well, by the way, do you remember the case that went to the Supreme Court on the inmate out of Georgia who said, you can't, you can kill me. You just can't use. That was our guy.
Oh,
Michael,
okay.
That was Michael Nance. A guy named Michael Nance was our guy from those robberies. He got the death penalty in Georgia, and he says, but I've been an IV drug user, so that would be really painful. You can shoot me, you just can't use the needle on me. Well, right. Anyway, long story short, we're sitting there, and this AUSA assistant U.S. attorney comes out, and he's laughing. And, the rule is you never ask a question you don't already know the answer to. And
That's
he's
right.
got this older gentleman, black gentleman, very proper, dressed really nice and stuff in there. And he's the witness to a murder and a stabbing and a robbery. And the guy stabbed the other guy with a knife. And so they're talking with him. And of course, it's kind of my cousin Vinny thing, the thickness of glasses. But, Mr. Johnson, you're telling me he actually was doing a good job. He says, you're telling me from 1 block away, you saw my client stab this guy. Yes, that's true. From 300 feet away, 372 feet, whatever they measured. Yeah. Well, Mr. Johnson, exactly how far can you see? He goes, I can see the sun. How far is that?
You gotta love it.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, and I always heard too the best cross-examination. If you can do a cross-examination like in 3 questions, that's good. 2 is great. 1 is super. And I said, give me an example. He said they had a robbery case one time, and the only alibi was the defendant's mother. So she gets up there and it says, the defense, passes the witness. Prosecution gets up there, only asks one question, goes, "You're the defendant's mother, aren't you?" "Yes." "Okay." That was it. Boom.
Yeah. Right.
Anyway, well, let's get into talking about this other one too, because that's one of the other reasons. This is the second time you cheated death.
Mm-hmm.
So, set the stage for us, because this one, I think probably in a lot of ways was a lot closer than the plane accident, because this one was personal. Well, in a sense, it was personal, but you were targeted. This wasn't like you're with a bunch of other people. So, let's set the stage for this. Let's start talking about what you knew, what was going on. So, tell us, when this happened, what was going on, where were you at?
We had had a real busy year leading up to a term of court we had coming up in the fall, and what I mean by that is we had a sheriff in one of my 3 counties that was just involved in a lot of unsavory stuff, and we had to do something that I never thought I'd have to do. We had to actually impeach a sheriff, and so we had gone through the whole process of getting the impeachment through the Sumter County grand jury, and then the case then had to be taken before the Alabama Supreme Court and tried for them to actually impeach him and remove him from office. And so that all happened, and then in the aftermath of that, we reconvened that grand jury and then charged him criminally for some of the things that had led to his impeachment. So that was the defendant that was about to go to trial in late November of that year. And so, there was a good bit of talk about it. Obviously, it had gotten a lot of attention when we went through the impeachment process. So we were in the process of trying to prepare for that. It was a lot of people. I can't remember how many.
Was the impeachment a criminal matter or a civil matter?
I don't know that it's either, to be honest with you. More, I mean, basically,
he's not being brought up on criminal charges, right? It's more
correct.
of a political mechanism to remove. It's like you would impeach, somebody to remove them from office. The
Correct.
Same thing, right?
Correct. So, we agreed with the grand jury that was convened to hear the impeachment. I just told them, I said, look, my primary objective is to get this guy out, because he's such a he's just like poison to this county and to law enforcement. So my major goal is just to get him removed, and then we'll come back if in fact that occurs. And if y'all think the evidence is sufficient, then you can decide whether or not you want to charge him criminally. So they did.
What was the nature of that made it rise to the level to where he said, we got to impeach this guy? I mean, the sheriff's elected, so that's kind of a tough thing to do, right? The voters elect him in.
Yeah, and it's not something you want to do, certainly being an elected official yourself. So, there were many things, but probably the most flagrant thing that he was doing, there was a guy that we had locked up in his jail that we had caught and charged with, I think, 3 separate counts of trafficking. He had trafficking weight cocaine, trafficking weight meth, trafficking weight. I think it maybe had heroin, if I'm not mistaken. But he was a known drug dealer. We had prosecuted him multiple times before that day. So we get him in jail, and we're moving towards a trial date for him. And over a period of time, we start hearing rumors, that this guy's getting let out, and he's driving a truck that the sheriff department owns and selling dope, and then coming back to jail. At first, we didn't believe it, and then we did some undercover work and confirmed that. But it got worse. Then when the community started complaining about seeing him out, then basically what he did was he gave him a room up in the administrative part of the building. The Sumter County Sheriff's Office is set up where you got the sheriff's office, and then the jail is on the back side of it. So, you leave like an administrative office, and then you go through some secured doors, and then you enter the jail part. he gave him a space up in the administrative part that had an outside door, and he basically had people bringing him drugs in through an open door, and was selling out of there as well. And then there was some human trafficking that was going on. He had women that he was trafficking that were doing the work for him. So it was just real ugly. Something that I never thought I'd have to deal with. So that's what led us to impeach him. And then when we,
what's his defense? We should have talked that. And name the stupidest defendant you had in court recently?
It's odd you say that, because when we presented the impeachment to the grand jury, I reached out to him and told him, if you want to come to grand jury and defend yourself, you're welcome, which is not something we do to defendants very often. And he had an attorney, and I was communicating with his attorney, of course, not him. And I said, if I'm not going to let your attorney in the grand jury room, but he can be outside in the hall. If you need to get up and go outside and confer with him or whatever, I'll allow you to do that. But I don't want it to be said that we presented this to a grand jury and didn't give you a chance to speak up and defend yourself. So he did, and it was painful, painful for him.
And the grand jury, they can't have their lawyer in there. So how do they go about defending themselves? I mean, you present the evidence, right? And then do they get a chance to, because you're presenting the evidence, so do they cross-examine witnesses? I mean, what is that process?
No, I mean, he was just called as a witness, but a witness on his own behalf, where he was basically allowed to come in there and say why he had not done these things that he knew he was being accused of. And of course, we had to spend 15 minutes advising him of his rights, and that he didn't have to testify. He wasn't compelled to testify, but that if he did, we could certainly use it against him and use it in future proceedings. So, he was just that brash. He thought he could come in and talk his way out of it. He was a popular sheriff. He was, I hate to use the word, he was worthless. I mean, he was no good for law enforcement, but, he just thought he had that much power, I guess, or influence that he could come in there and talk his way out of it. So he did. He couldn't. It went very poorly for him. And then
did the grand jury members get to ask questions?
Yes, they did. And that was painful as well. But, so we moved on. After the impeachment was over, after he'd been removed, we presented the criminal charges to the grand jury. They did indict him. I can't remember. I want to say it was like an 8 or 9 count indictment. There were other things he was doing where he was just using his office for personal gain. So there were some of those involved. And then you had human trafficking charges. You had conspiracy to commit a controlled substance crime. We charged him as accessory to distribution. I mean, there were a multitude of charges. So that was the case that was coming up. That was the case that we were preparing, because there were so many people involved in it, both in the jail, in the sheriff's department, out in the community. We were trying to get our ducks in a row for that. It was about, I want to say, maybe 2 weeks out. And so that particular day I had met with
hey, real quick.
Yes.
Who were all the folks involved in this investigation with you? Obviously, it's kind of hard to use the county to investigate this guy, because that's right. So who is the State Bureau of Investigation in Alabama? Is there a separate one from the State Patrol, or did they help? Yeah. I mean, who actually did the investigation?
They have unified in Alabama, where everything is under the umbrella of ALEA, the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, but they have a division that is called the State Bureau of Investigation. So when we realized that we had to do something about the problem, I went to Montgomery. I sat down and talked to the director at the time. We laid out for him, what we believed to be occurring, and how bad it had gotten, and that something needed to be done. So they assisted us. And when I say us, it was my office, and I run through my office a drug task force, all of which are very good law enforcement officers. And so it was my task force agents working in conjunction with ALEA. And then even there on about halfway through, the FBI got involved. And so it was a FBI, SBI, DA's office investigation.
What was the nexus to get the FBI involved? What was the predicate offense for them?
It's probably public official, isn't it?
That's a good question, Morgan, and I should be able to answer it just immediately, but I struggle now to recall. I want to say it was something as simple as we were still just gathering information. We were still investigating, and one of the things that we were interested in doing was doing surveillance on the residence that the drug dealer would literally leave jail. He would go to his house. He would sell drugs all day. And then someone from the sheriff's office would come and pick him up and bring him back to jail. And so we were wanting to put up cameras and do surveillance on his residence to show what was going on there whenever he was being brought and dropped off at his residence. And it was easier to have a federal agency involved to get the type of wiretaps, those types of things, than it was trying to go through the state. So it seems, if I recall correctly, that's how they got involved. Now, we ended up with
I think it's public corruption. I think you're right, Steve, too. It's public corruption because that's one of the things they have jurisdiction over.
Correct.
Corrupt.
That's correct.
Officials.
So, it was 3 agencies involved in the actual investigation.
Right. So now you say you're about 2 weeks out. So take us from there.
Yeah. So we're just trying to prepare. And that particular day, we were trying to account for everybody because we had gotten all these people, together to go and
how big's
try
your witness list?
I want to say it was north of 40 people. And we had done that once already to try the case before the Alabama Supreme Court, because it was basically the same case, just this time, we were trying it in Sumter County for criminal charges, but the evidence was the same. So, we were trying to get a grip on that again. We were trying to make sure that, we could locate all our people. And so I had met with a task force agent and my investigator, and we broke for lunch, and there was a place that we would eat that was just a block from the office. So just in interest of time, we just went down there real quick and caught some lunch, and we walked back to the office, and I had gotten some food to take home to my wife. She wanted something to eat. And so we stopped there in front of the office, and we actually got stopped by a couple of ladies that we had seen inside the restaurant. I had actually interviewed one of the two for a position that was coming open in my office about a week before that. And she said something to me about, hey, I wanted to tell you something I didn't tell you the other day. And we stood there in a group and talked for a minute. And then I walked away to go get in my vehicle, and they were still standing outside, those two ladies and my task force agent and my investigator. And so I got to my vehicle, opened the door, I got in my vehicle, and I think before I even closed my door, I saw the gentleman that shot me. I saw him pull in across the street, but this is downtown. My office is right downtown. It's just right. It's on a corner of the actual town square. So, the streets are pretty narrow. It's not like a real wide street. And, it was something about the way he looked at me or my vehicle when he got out that really gave me a bad vibe. I can't describe it. It just immediately put me on alert. It just didn't feel right. I don't know what it was, just a sixth sense or whatever.
Did you ever meet this guy before?
Yeah, I knew him. I knew him. I had known him years earlier before I was a prosecutor. I'd actually represented him. He'd gotten behind in child support, and they were threatening to put him in jail, if he didn't get caught up. And he'd come in and retained me to represent him in it, and we got it resolved and got everything straight for him. And, I felt like, we had a pretty mutual respect for one another. If we saw each other out, which wasn't often, but when we did bump into each other, we always stopped and spoke. I had not seen him in several years before the day of the shooting, but anytime I had seen him prior to that day, it was always we would chat and just catch up on what he was doing and what I was doing, but certainly not a bad relationship between us at all.
When you represented him, was he a state trooper at that point?
No, he had left employment with the troopers. I think he was driving a truck at the time.
And there was a little bit of a story behind one of the reasons why he left the state patrol, right? I mean, there was something they thought, didn't go to a grand jury, it didn't get an indictment, but he was suspected of being involved in something else, right?
Yeah, he had been a suspect in another shooting. That, like you said, he was not charged, but he was a suspect in another shooting.
And that was a shooting involving another public official, wasn't it?
Correct.
A judge.
A judge.
Yeah, and when you say he had left his employment, what I read, he was fired.
Yeah, I think that'd be correct.
You're being a whole lot more diplomatic.
We're having to pull answers out of you. I'm going to start objecting. I'm going to start raising objections here. Non-responsive, Your Honor.
Well, look,
I know you're trying to be, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and the man's deceased. I mean, I was taught never to speak ill of the dead. So I hate he did what he did. I hate.
Well, let's just speak factual. Let's don't talk bad. Let's just speak factual. So, I mean, but the fact was he was fired from the state patrol. It's one of those things. It doesn't matter if you did it or not, but when you get involved in enough stuff like that, pretty soon even the state patrol goes, yeah, this is not going to work out. You can't be even associated with the case like that and still maintain credibility in court and stuff. So
that's
Greg,
right.
Greg, one thing we say on Game of Crimes, Morgan and I are firm believers in this. Nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop because they make us all look bad.
That's right. I totally agree with that.
I love your being judicious in your wording and diplomatic and I mean admire you for that. But this son of a bitch made us all look bad because of what he did.
Yep.
And what you're getting ready to tell us he was trying to do.
Yeah.
So you're seeing him. You see him across the street. So take it from there again.
Yeah. I mean, when I saw him, I mean it concerned me enough that I almost grabbed the weapon that I keep in my vehicle. The vehicle I drove, it had a concealed compartment, just something that was designed in the vehicle, but you had to push a button and to be able to access it to get to it. And I almost grabbed it, but when I look back at him, he wasn't looking at me anymore, and he was going to the trunk of his car. So for whatever reason, I just relaxed and said, well, he's just here to get something or bring something to somebody downtown.
Now, this compartment you're talking, was that just because it's the vehicle, or is there a reason you were carrying a firearm? Because that's not that it's uncommon, but it's not usually common for a district attorney to have a concealed weapon.
I've pretty much always kept a weapon in my vehicle. I've never carried one on my person until that day. I've carried one on my person since that day. But I mean, it's the nature of what we do. I mean, we deal with a lot of bad people, and a lot of those people, regardless of the fact that they do what they do to bring themselves in my world, if they get sent to prison or whatever, some of them do have an axe to grind with you, even though it has nothing to do with you. But so I think it's just prudent to have some protection close by, because just based on what we do. But anyway, so I saw him go into the trunk of his car, and I took my eyes off of him long enough to engage, put my vehicle in drive. And when I looked back up from that, I saw him, and he had already closed some distance between his vehicle and mine, and he was already aiming the shotgun at me. So, really, there was no reason why he shouldn't have killed me. I've resigned to that fact. It was just one of those things. I think there were several things that helped me. I had heavy tint on my windows. I think that slowed down some of the shot. I think the biggest part of the initial shot he fired, it hit my side view mirror. So I think it caught a lot, because we all know I wasn't fast enough to dodge a shot. So I was sitting straight up when I saw him, and the first shot was fired. I just got lucky, and because some of them hit the side view mirror and some of them got slowed down by the tint in the window. What did end up hitting me just wasn't that bad. I got one in my arm and I got one in my side, but then I was down at that point. I mean, I just laid down, as far as I could, and he shot 4 more times, and all those shots came through my truck. I had some slugs that went all the way through my truck. Came in one side and went out the other side, and
Whoa.
he just didn't hit me. I had buckshot that went in the back of my seat that didn't hit me. So I was just real fortunate.
So he's not only shooting shells with pellets, but he's got slugs.
Yeah, there was slugs that went all the way through my vehicle, entered one side, and when they came out the other side, they left holes that big around. I think there were 2 that went all the way through my vehicle, and there was buckshot that went through, and went all the way through my seats. They were like 1 buck or 2 buck, 2-aught. So he was shooting an assortment of shells.
So when you were first starting to go and you said he came at you, so like if you're facing north, like that's 12 o'clock, he was coming at you from what, like the 11 o'clock position, coming at you kind of angled?
Yes. Yeah. About 10 or 11.
Okay.
Yeah. Because he was, instead of being parked directly across from me, he was 1 space up from me. So he was coming at that much of an angle. And, like I say, the first shot I heard, and, it just, when it ripped through the vehicle, I think when it hit that mirror, I think that was the worst thing, because my eyes were open at that point, and so all of that debris from the glass and the plastic on that rear or side mirror, it went in my eyes, and I couldn't see. I mean, it just blinded me. All that stuff just went in my eyes, and when I laid down, I mean, I couldn't see at all. I was trying to reach for that place where my weapon was at the time, but I couldn't see well enough to find the button so that I could get to it. Then I was just a sitting duck.
So did you see, I think going back to what you said, you saw the shotgun before the shot was taken, or was it the shot so you saw the shotgun? Okay.
I saw it, but it was almost instantaneous. I mean, as soon as I looked down the barrel of the gun, it seemed like just right after that, I heard the report of the gun.
Well, and the context we're setting too, because it just goes back to the discussion you were just having, because you had one of your investigators and a task force officer talking to the other lady. Where are they at when this thing goes down?
I want to say it was 3 vehicles, behind me, or 2. I'm not sure. I know my investigator was parked behind me, and it seemed like there was one other car. So, 2 car lengths, and then they were right there on the sidewalk, behind those cars.
So they're not around the corner or anything?
No. They were right there, thankfully. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here, because, I mean, that's when they engaged him, when he was in the process of reloading to because, I mean, when he stopped shooting, that was the very first thing that I thought of, was the next thing that was going to happen was the gun was just going to come through the barrel was going to come through the window, and he was just going to shoot me laying there. Was when the shooting stopped, I said, that's going to be the next thing that happens. And maybe I was thinking about what Cole and Leslie were doing, but it was about the time that thought crossed my mind about the next thing he's going to do is just put the gun right through the window and shoot me, is when I heard them engage him. So at that point, I knew I had a chance.
Now, were they yelling at him like drop the gun, or was it just, did they just, and he obviously didn't do it, right? He continued to reload. Yeah.
Cole Basinger, who is my investigator, bear with me, it still gets to me, but
not a problem, brother.
He went out in the road, no cover, and engaged him with a shotgun. And despite being in that position, he still, I recall clearly hearing him tell him 2 or 3 times to put the gun down before I ever heard a shot. And I think the first shot that Cole got off, he did retreat back to the rear of his vehicle, and he posted up on the trunk of his vehicle to engage Cole at that point. But Cole was, he was not in a covered position. He was standing in the middle of the road. So, he's a father too.
Now, the bad guys, did he reload his shotgun, or did he go get a handgun?
He did. When he got to his car, he got reloaded. And that's when the task force agent, his name is Leslie Hines, Leslie came down the sidewalk. So at that point, he was trying to get to the other side so they could flank him. And so they got him pinned down from 2 different positions once Leslie got on the other side, and they drove him back. He finally couldn't stay where he was behind his car, and there was an alley between the buildings right there close to where his car was parked, and he tried to get into that alley. But Leslie was the same way. Once he got beyond the vehicles, he he was not in a covered position either, and he shot. Steve Smith shot at him several times, and there was buckshot all over the side of the building where he was, and how he didn't hit him is beyond me as well.
That's divine intervention, brother. That's all I can say.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I don't know how I survived that first part, but I mean, there's no doubt in my mind I survived the rest of it because of those two guys.
Well, and every article I read about this, and I've read a whole lot of articles about the shooting. They all pretty much say the same, but you're not bashful about immediately pointing out who your saviors are on this. And you're pointing out that Cole and Leslie are the ones that saved your life. And if it wasn't for them, you wouldn't have your family now, or you wouldn't be here talking about anything. And I love that because it shows the humble side. You recognize what actually happened that day. Those two guys are heroes.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. And, it comes back to so many things. I mean, Leslie, he is, I don't know the right word. It'd be hard to describe him, but he is a firearms instructor. So he is very well trained, and he has made training such a focus within our drug task force. And JR has been a big part of that, Steve, as you know. We've gotten people from all over the country to come in and train our task force agents. Some of the best training I think probably is available in the United States. And so without a doubt, that had a big part in what they did, but it's still, y'all know this. I mean, you can be trained no matter how good you're trained, you still got to have the fortitude to walk into a man that's got a shotgun shooting. And both of those guys did that.
It's easy to shoot paper because paper doesn't shoot back.
Yeah, paper. So,
and just so our listeners can know this, one of the things I found was a video where Cole and Leslie are being interviewed as they're finishing up. I think it was a 3-day firearms training class with one of the professionals, a former special forces guy that they had brought in to train them.
Right.
And they're humble in their opinions, but they talk about how because of that training, it's almost they could anticipate what each other was going to do. So as Cole setting up, in one position, Leslie's flanking the guy, and Cole says, "I knew that's what he's going to do," and that comes from practice. That comes from being together all the time,
being
developing that
each
personal,
other.
the trust and respect in each other. And people, you can watch that on YouTube.
Yeah.
So let's close out what happened here, because they engage him and he starts to go to the alley. So how much longer does this gun battle happen before it's over? How much longer do they go?
He retreated in the alley, and I think he stopped at some point. He engaged Leslie. They exchanged gunfire, and then he turned to go down the alley, and I think that's when Leslie crossed the road and got a round off that stopped him. And then he still, even after he went down, he sat there and continued to fire back at Leslie, from a seated position, even after that. So there was from where I was, it sounded like, I know it sounds kind of silly, but it sounded like a small war. I mean, I don't know how many rounds total were fired between Cole, Leslie, and Steve Smith, but it was a bunch. I think I remember Leslie saying he shot 3 magazines. So
wow.
Cole left after Leslie had him in the alley and had him pinned down. Cole left and came back to my vehicle, just to see what my condition was. So at that point, it was just he and Leslie. But the whole shootout didn't last more than a minute.
Yeah, but that's like a lifetime, though.
You're not kidding.
So,
I just want to say that I met Cole and Leslie the first time we came down. We were out there at JR's ranch, and he had us all out for a steak dinner that night. Were you there that night?
Yes,
I think you were. Yeah, and as you're getting to know all the police officers down there, we're hanging out with everybody, just trying to meet everybody. And of course, the war stories start because we're cops. That's what we do.
Oh, yeah.
We tell war stories, right?
That's right.
And the next thing I know, somebody's telling me, well, Greg's got a war story over here. And then somebody told me about Cole and Leslie, and the guys were, they're not bragging.
No.
And the reason I'm saying all this is because I noticed, I don't know why, but I noticed that everybody was carrying, everybody's in plain clothes. We're out having a good time, but they're not just carrying. They've got multiple magazines on them. And I'm thinking, man, this is rural Alabama. Do you really need to suit up like that? But then I found out the story and why. And you tell me that Leslie went through 3 mags right there. You got to do a lot of training to be able to be in combat and change those mags and continue to engage a target like that. Yeah. So, well, this explains a whole lot hearing the story from you.
Well, I will tell you, Murph, too, that was one of the things we went through when, as a trooper, but you're out there by yourself. Sometimes your closest backup's 30, 45 minutes away. And so we got permission. Right. I got permission to modify our shotgun. So I put an extended tube on it so I could put another 3 rounds into it. I had a sleeve on the back, had extra mags for, at that time, extra speed loaders for the Smith & Wesson, extra clips for the Mini 14 we had. But yeah, that's one of the things, you go to war with what you have. But let's just finish out this last part of it, though, Greg. So what finally brought this to an end? Did he finally surrender? Did he have to be taken out? What brought this whole firefight to an end?
No, he would not surrender. I think, like I said, even after Leslie got him down, he continued to fire, and it was a gun battle until I guess Leslie finally hit him with a shot that was fatal. But that's how it ended. It was he made absolutely no effort to ever stop firing or heed any commands to stop firing or put the gun down. All he did was shoot.
Well, and it begs the question, which is, I know, one of the hardest things: why? Why did this guy decide that he was going to pick you that day? And what precipitated? I mean, what? I know they went back and tried to look at it, but you realize the question: of all days, why today? And of all people, why you?
I don't think anybody could answer why that day, but according to his sister and his girlfriend, they had noticed a change in him over about a 6 or 7 month period of time where he'd gotten very paranoid. He was telling them that he lived over in Sumter County. He was telling them that he thought somebody was breaking into his house when he was gone. That kind of morphed into he thought they were going into his house when he was gone and trying to poison him, messing with his food, with his medicine, things like that. It had gotten so bad where he had booby-trapped his doors, had set up guns, to shoot somebody that would have come in. He was coming in, going through a window. He was parking a half a mile up the road and walking to his house. And he had communicated to, I think, the girlfriend that he said, I can't catch these people that are doing this to me. So I know it has to be Griggers' guys that are doing it because they're the only ones that are good enough to do it and me not catch them. So I think that's where he got fixated on me. I don't know why he picked that day, but I think it was just a gradual, he was getting more and more paranoid. Whatever was driving his paranoia, where it was true mental illness or what. But
that's what I was going to ask. It sounded almost either one of the things like mental illness or something with drugs. So obviously they do an autopsy on him. They do toxicology screens. Anything come back on that to indicate he was under the influence of anything or?
I honestly don't recall if I ever even looked at an autopsy report on him to know. I don't recall anybody mentioning to me that he had anything of significance in the toxicology, but I think there was certainly an element of mental illness there that was in play, which is weird because I'm sure, as you know, I mean, those types of things, it almost appears as if he become paranoid schizophrenic. And that's something that, usually if it hadn't developed or shown itself by the time you're about 21 or 22, then you don't ever see it. And
that's very late in life for something like that to manifest itself.
Yeah. So, but that appeared to be why he was there. I mean, the side of the story not about many people know is that his trunk was full of weapons and ammunition. He came there to kill everybody in my office. That would have been his plan, that's what he would have done. But for encountering me out there on the street when he did, his plan was just to walk in the door, probably with multiple guns, and kill everybody that was in there.
And he just happened to see you getting in your truck there.
That's what I say, target of opportunity. He saw you there and decided to pull over park and do it.
Luckily. Correct.
What kind of truck did you have?
A Chevy Tahoe.
Man. Well, it's a good thing you had a big-ass truck like that, too, because that's another thing you don't think about, right? But that's something that contributed to saving your life, too.
No question. No question. I mean, it took a lot of I'm sure, it took a lot of the steam out of those projectiles that were coming through the door and whatnot.
Wow. I tell you what, I'm pretty sure Cole and Leslie don't have to buy a beer when you're around, do they?
No, they do not. They do not.
I'll have to remember that too. Next time we come down, they won't buy while I'm around.
Well, we're kind of getting to the close of this, but I got to ask you one question. How do you deal with this with your wife and family? Because this is not your first close call. This is your second close call. I mean, it's like, I don't know of anybody. I know of people who've had one, like I told you, my friend on the Captain Sully, but I never run into anybody that's had two like this.
Hey, I named my dog Sully, by the way, or my wife named our dog Sully, I think, and I said it was because of Captain Sully because I'm a big fan. But Lord, I mean they've been so supportive. It's not something you just forget about. You can't just get over it. I mean, there's a lot of still anxiety at times. But I don't know. I think once you get over the initial trauma of the deal, it's kind of like the airplane crash. You realize that you were given days that you probably shouldn't have, and you hopefully you take advantage of that. We've had another child since that happened, so I'm when I look at Polly now, who just turned a year old on April 9, I mean, she never would have been if that day had turned out differently. But my little boy, he turns 7 June 3rd, and I'm so glad he still has a dad. But so hopefully you just appreciate being given a second chance, and I know they've been there definitely for me, dealing with it. So it's all good now.
Just to put this in context, I don't think we ever mentioned the time period. This occurred in November 2018, correct?
Correct.
Wow. Yeah, so it's so your final wounds were 2 pellets?
Yeah, and they were very minor. I mean, the one that went in my tricep, it probably didn't penetrate more than about an inch, and the one that went in my side was the same way because Cole and I were paranoid. I mean, Cole drove me to the hospital, the whole way just because I was bleeding. We were just convinced that something, there bound to have been something worse than that because he shot so many times. But once we got in there and they put me through the X-ray machine a couple of times and realized that, I didn't have anything unaccounted for.
The articles I was reading said you were shot in the face, but obviously that wasn't true. I thought maybe that's why you have a beard now.
Yeah, somehow that got reported. I caught some stuff in my eyes.
The glass. I was going to say the glass stuff hitting in your eye. Somebody would have thought you'd been shot in the face, but
were you bleeding from the face?
My eye looked really bad for a while, just because I guess all that glass and metal and stuff. The first they did a press conference, I want to say maybe 2 days after the shooting, and it looked really bad during that. And I think that maybe where some of it came from, but mainly what happened to my eye though was just from the glass and stuff. Because I mean, I still get, to this day, I still get glass out of my eye.
Wow!
I'll wake up and I'll have a piece in the corner of my eye, and I get it out. That's a piece of glass.
Wow. So, boy, I tell you what, man, that's.
Well, there's two mic drop moments. You go to a party and you've got 2 stories. There's just
that's the drop the mic one. Yeah. Holy cow!
And if somebody tried to tell you that, you'd go, "You're full of shit." There's no way. It's like nobody goes through that kind of stuff. But man, you are living proof. Well, look, the good Lord's got a plan for you. We don't know what it is yet, but you're not going to mind if you say, let's go out to eat sometime. If I say, look, I'll get something and I'll meet you somewhere.
I'll take my own car.
If you want to travel, you're safe to fly with me, though, because the odds are very good that you will not be on a crash with me.
Yeah, it's hard to do it. Yeah, twice. Well, look, it's so amazing what you've been through. But look, we got to tell you though, this is so interesting, and thanks for indulging us on the first part too, because I've been in court many times. Murph, you've been in court many times. We kind of know what we know, but we never get to get into the mind of a prosecutor, and say, how do you make these decisions? What's important to you? And I got to tell you, I hope that there's a lot more people out there like you that take their job seriously, that say, look, it's to my benefit to make sure you as the defense attorney, you're ready for court. I mean, people are going to get freaked out, but here you are calling up somebody said, hey, you better file this motion or we're both going to get in trouble with the judge,
Yeah.
And you're actually helping them. And that's unheard of for a lot of people. They go, no, the job is to slam them and just do what you have to do. But it's good to know that there's good people out there like you doing this kind of work out there. And you folks can't see this, but this is us saluting you. Greg Griggers saying, thank you, sir, for a job well done.
Thank you.
In law enforcement, you probably know this, Greg, because you've been in it for 20 years now at least. And cops, we talk to each other. We talk about the ADAs and the prosecutors and assistant U.S. attorneys and so forth and the judges. And I'm pretty sure that you would be referred to as a policeman's prosecutor, meaning that you're one of the guys that they want to work with. And it's a straight out compliment.
And I definitely take it that way, and I feel that way. I mean, I've had a good relationship with all the law enforcement agencies in this circuit, really from day one. And you got to appreciate what those guys go through, and they have to appreciate what you have to do with their work product. And if you don't build those relationships, and if they can't appreciate what you're trying to do, with their cases, you just end up just butting heads. So. I've enjoyed the 20 years that I've spent trying to prosecute cases that the men and women have made in my circuit, but you can't do it having a standoff relationship with them. You've got to spend time with them, and they've got to know that you care about what they're doing. And I mean, y'all know, some of these cases get very personal for law enforcement, and they want to know that you take them serious and that you're going to take them as serious as they do. So, I feel like I've always had a very good relationship with my law enforcement people.
Well, it's been a true honor to have you on here. I appreciate you giving us your time here.
I appreciate the invite.
Looking forward to seeing you the next time we come down to see JR and go out to Soggy Bottom Lodge. And I think they're trying to set up something down there in Tuscaloosa, maybe over at the University of Alabama. We'll see what happens down there. But God bless you, brother. Glad you're still here with us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Morgan, it was a pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you. But although we'll have to see if Notre Dame and Alabama meet this year. But anyway, good luck to you. Let's see what happens. I was going to say War Eagle, but your heart lies with Roll Tide. So we'll
tell you what. If Alabama and Notre Dame meet, me and you might have to put some money on that, Morgan.
Well, we will. Hey, look, it's going to be our year. We're building back. Marcus Freeman's done a good job. We're not rebuilding. We're reloading. So this will be an interesting year. Well, hey, look. Excellent story. Don't you go anywhere. You guys stay right there. Everybody else, stay tuned for the debrief. Okay, as if surviving a plane crash, which few people do, wasn't enough. He survives an ambush, which he should have been killed in that one as well, too.
Yep.
The guy was shooting slugs and everything else. And so it is. And, to this day, and this is one of the things you'll find out, folks, when you hear these stories, it could be years later, like with Dave Reichert talking about the Green River Killer. He still got choked up talking about the victims. Greg gets choked up talking about the two officers who saved his life and engaged this shooter.
That just shows you how humble this man is. I love it that he did get emotional about it, because it's all about those two police officers putting themselves in harm's way with a former police officer shooting it back at them. They were willing to risk their own lives to save Gregg. And you know what? It would have been anybody in that community that they would have done the same thing for. That's why we have Game of Crimes, to show you the bravery, the sacrifices that these law enforcement professionals are willing to make, even in some of the smaller rural areas of our country here. So God bless you, Gregg, for what you went through. Again, I'm not ever going to travel with you, I don't think. I'm not sure I want to even ride in a car with you, because who knows what's going to happen next. I'm not sure how many more of those cats' lives you've got left, but brother, we're glad you're still here with us.
Yeah. Well, you got 7 more to go because we got 7 more stories we could tell. So that was a good one, man. And seriously, it's like,
It was.
And you think about it, it's like, oh my God, you survive a plane crash, 13 people died. A lot more should have died. In fact, he should have died, except you know what they did? They realized they needed to survive, and you do what you got to do to survive. You climb out through a seam in the plane. Look, I
burned his hands doing it.
But you know what? Burned hands and a broken leg is preferable to the fate that it was the other 13. So again, we're not making light of it. It's like, but imagine surviving something like that.
Absolutely.
Anyway, hats off to you there, Greg Griggers, Lower Alabama District Attorney, Demopolis.
Yes,
I thought it was Thermopolis. I thought it was something out of the movie 300, Demopolis. It sounded like something Xerxes would attack or King Leonidas would defend, Demopolis. But as we found out that he's French. But anyway, hey guys, we hope you enjoyed that episode. Again, another great episode. Head on over to Apple, Spotify, hit those 5 stars. Let us know what you think about it. Let your friends know what you think about it. More importantly, that's the way this gets out there. Some people think it's all social media. No, it's not. It's word of mouth. You tell a friend, that friend tells a friend, you say, listen, you got to listen to this. And we spent a lot of time at the Southern California Gang Conference, hey, give me your phone. Let me show you how to subscribe to Game of Crimes. Artificially inflating our numbers. No. Hey, but guys, but that's the way it works. And we have people come up to us. Hey, I heard you, where's it at? So to let everybody know, Game of Crimes. Also, head on over to gameofcrimespodcast.com for more information about the show. We put stuff on there. We put books on there. Also, check us out on that social media thing at Game of Crimes on Twitter, Game of Crimes on podcast, and the Instagram. But also make sure you head on over to Patreon. Patreon.com/Game of Crimes. We just released Q&A. We've got 911 coming out. We've got You Can't Make This Shit Up coming out this month. We've got season 2 of Narcos that Murph and I will be reviewing to see if Murph, I'm going to see how accurate your recollection is, because we know the series is 100% accurate. We're going to test your knowledge against the series and see how close you are. And I want you to finally come clean.
I'll probably be a little off.
I want you to come clean and finally admit you and JP did throw somebody out of the helicopter. We're going to get a world first confession on our next review of Narcos.
The statute of limitations on murder never runs out. So I probably won't hear that story.
But we have an episode coming out with somebody, Murph. We'll talk about that. We won't give it away, but we got some kind of out with somebody that admitted while we were talking to him, he's handled it, but good for 9 murders.
Oh yeah. The stuff that's coming up. I mean, some of the guests that we've got coming up, we are so far out ahead right now that when I'm calling, I talked to a couple more I haven't even told you about that are ready to go. And I'm telling them, just give us a few weeks, because we just have so much in the tube right now. I think you guys are really going to like what you hear coming up.
Yeah, you definitely are. Anyway, so we know what you're going to like, what you're going to hear going up, because the best part you want to hear about what's coming up now is the end. So this is the end of it, guys. What do you like best about the podcast? The end. Okay, guys, thank you. We appreciate, and thank you, guys. We really appreciate all your support, and thank you guys once again for playing the biggest, baddest, most dangerous game of all, the Game of Crimes.